When the power goes out, most of us just think it's temporary, right? But what if the grid itself is aging faster than it's being repaired? So in this explainer, we're going to dig into a really big question. Does U.S. power and water infrastructure actually meet the standards of what's called a high reliability organization? And what does a proper risk assessment tell us about where the next major failure might be hiding? We're going to look at the data, the vulnerabilities, and the principles that separate just keeping the lights on from preventing a real catastrophe. Here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start with the power grid and our water systems. Then we'll put on our risk management hats to look at them differently. After that, we'll introduce the gold standard, high reliability organizations. And finally, we'll map out what a real path to resilience looks like. All right, first up, let's talk about the backbone of our entire economy, the U.S. electric grid. It's an absolute marvel of engineering, no doubt. But here's the thing, it's a system that was built for a different century, and it's now facing some very 21st century pressures. Think about this for a second. 70% of our power transformers are over a quarter century old. And look, these aren't just abstract numbers. These are critical, massive pieces of equipment operating way past their prime, which makes them more and more likely to fail. And this isn't just a few weak links. The problem is systemic. The core of the grid, the transmission lines, the substations, a huge chunk of it was built 50 to 75 years ago. It just wasn't designed for our modern world, for our energy demands. And now it's really struggling to keep up. And the strain isn't just about age, right? We've got a perfect storm brewing. There's rising demand from things like electric vehicles and massive data centers. We've got more frequent and more severe weather, brutal heat waves, punishing winter storms. We're trying to integrate new renewable energy sources. And to top it all off, you have all this old hardware never designed for an internet connection that's now a target for cyber attacks. This is where we get to something called cascading failure. You see, the power grid doesn't exist in a bubble. It's what keeps our water systems running, our communications online, our transportation moving. So a major failure in the grid can start a domino effect, taking down a whole range of other essential services with it. So you might be wondering, who's in charge of making sure this doesn't happen? Well, that's where NERC, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, comes in. They set the technical standards. And they're overseen by FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Together, they create the mandatory rules of the road for keeping the lights on. Okay, now let's switch gears and talk about our water systems, because they're facing a very similar set of challenges. And while a broken water main under the street is a lot less obvious than a citywide blackout, the vulnerabilities are every bit as critical. I want you to just let this sink in. Every 2 minutes, a water main breaks somewhere in the United States. This isn't some rare event we're talking about. It's a constant rolling failure of old equipment that's happening right now, day in and day out. And when you add it all up, the impact is just staggering. We lose an estimated 6 billion gallons of treated water every single day just from leaks. That's water we've already spent money and energy cleaning, and it's a massive indicator of a system that is physically falling apart. You see, you've got this perfect storm of risks. You've got pipes that are hitting the end of their 75 to 100-year lifespan. You have wastewater plants that are running over capacity. On top of that, because water systems are so decentralized, they're what you'd call target-rich but cyber-poor. And we've all seen the tragic consequences, like in Flint, Michigan, where corroded pipes led to a massive public health crisis. The main regulator here is the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. And what they've been finding lately is frankly alarming. In their inspections, over 70% of water systems were violating the Safe Drinking Water Act. And the reasons why? Often it was for shockingly basic cybersecurity mistakes. Things like using default passwords, sharing logins, or not cutting off access for people who don't work there anymore. Okay, so we've laid out the physical state of these systems. Now let's step back and look at this whole situation through a professional risk management lens. This means we have to stop just reacting to things after they break and start proactively figuring out where the next big failure is coming from. So a standard risk assessment really boils down to 4 steps. First, you identify the hazard. What could go wrong? Say, a transformer explosion or a cyber attack. Then you analyze the likelihood. How probable is it that this will happen? And you analyze the consequence. If it does happen, how bad will it be? Put those last 2 together, and that's how you determine the overall level of risk. A risk matrix like this makes that relationship really clear. Something with a high likelihood but a low consequence, like a minor pipe leak, well, that's a moderate risk. But an event that has a low likelihood but a high consequence, like a major flood at a substation or a cyber attack on a water treatment plant, that can be a high or even a critical risk.
And that right there is the key takeaway for infrastructure. We can handle the small, constant failures. But the real goal of professional risk management is to hunt down and stop those high consequence events, the ones that trigger those cascading failures and cause widespread harm, even if it's something that has never happened before.
So this brings us to the really important part. How do we actually manage these incredibly complex, high consequence systems? Well, we can learn from a group of organizations that have pretty much mastered it. They're called high reliability organizations, or HROs, and these are places that operate in environments where they simply cannot afford to fail.
So what exactly is an HRO? Well, it's an organization that manages to avoid disaster in situations where, honestly, you'd almost expect accidents to happen. We're talking about places like aircraft carrier flight decks, nuclear power plants. These teams operate with a totally different culture and set of practices.
HROs all run on 5 core principles. First, they have a preoccupation with failure. They are constantly looking for small problems before they blow up. Second, they have a reluctance to simplify. They embrace the messy complexity of an issue instead of looking for easy answers. Third, sensitivity to operations. They listen to the people on the front lines. Fourth, a commitment to resilience. They practice for failure so they can bounce back fast. And fifth, deference to expertise. The person with the most knowledge gets to make the call, not just the person with the highest rank.
So let's hold up that HRO mirror to our current reality. The HRO principle is preoccupation with failure. But for many utilities, the reality is deferred maintenance because of budget cuts. The HRO principle is deference to expertise. But the reality is often a shortage of skilled workers and decisions being made based on political pressure, not just solid engineering. That's the cultural gap we're dealing with.
Okay, let's bring this all together. What is the actual path forward? What does a realistic, safety-first approach to building resilience actually look like on the ground? And this brings me to a very practical question, and I want you to really think about it. If your organization, your facility, your community lost power or water for 3 straight days, 72 hours, would your emergency plan actually work? Or is it just a binder sitting on a shelf? Is it a tested, functional plan that accounts for these very real vulnerabilities? Look, building true resilience isn't about one single fix. It's about building a whole new system. A system that shifts from just reacting to failures to actively predicting them using data. A system that invests in redundancy, like microgrids and backup water supplies. It needs a skilled, well-trained workforce, and it has to be backed by strong regulatory enforcement from agencies like FERC and the EPA. And absolutely core to all of it, it has to treat cybersecurity as a safety issue, not just an IT problem. I want to leave you with this one thought. Infrastructure doesn't just fail overnight. It fails slowly. It's a quiet process of decay, of deferred decisions, of risks that we slowly get used to. It fails piece by piece, day by day, until one day it doesn't. If you're looking for serious safety analysis, breakdowns of infrastructure risk, and practical, real-world HSE education, subscribe to HSE's study.